All right. Aloha mai kako. Welcome to Interim Guidance, Navigating Music and Worship Safely, a webinar for music ministers, church choir directors, and spiritual leaders of all faiths. My name is Jay Saplan, as I've just stated, and we have an exciting panel of incredible minds throughout the country, just to kind of offer mana'o and some guidance on how they are navigating music and worship at this time. I would like to introduce Sarah Graham to go ahead and get us started. Can you tell us about yourself, Sarah?
Sure. I'm a music professor at Lewis Clark State College in Lewiston, Idaho. We're a small rural town in the Lewis Clark Valley, right on the border of Washington. And I'm also the music director at the Episcopal Church of the Nativity here in Lewiston as well. We're a small congregation, a small choir. Most of our congregants and choir members are over the age of 60, 65, around there. So that gives you kind of an idea of our demographic.
Thank you. Dorita Seth?
Hello, everyone. I'm Dorita Seth. I am calling in to you from Danville, California, which is an affluent suburb right across the bay from San Francisco. I am the director of music at St. Timothy's Episcopal Church, where I lead from the organ, direct the choir, and run the concert series. Most of my congregation, it's a very small church, but it's leaking with people every Sunday. Well, it was before all of this happened, huh? And most of my congregants are over the age of 65, and I have a thriving choir program there, as well as I take pride in being instrumental in changing and transforming the singing culture there at my lovely church. So I hope to share some of that information with you today.
And Christopher.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christopher Gravis. I'm the canon for music and cathedral arts at St. John's Episcopal Cathedral in Los Angeles. I'm also the director of choral activities at Cal State LA. And at the cathedral, I am really privileged to have a phenomenal choral and organ series. I have about 12 staff singers. Most of them are professionals in town, either sing with our resident Los Angeles arts organizations like the Los Angeles Master Chorale or LA Opera, or sing in the studios around town in the film and television industry.
Awesome. Before I introduce our Nats Hawaii president, Dr. Martina Bingham, I just want to go over with how we're going to communicate with each other this evening. At any point, if you have a question that you would like to address to any of our panelists, I encourage you to go ahead and use the raised hand feature on our chat so that we can call on you. And that can happen at any point of the webinar. If you are wanting to address a question that you would like to ask anonymously, please feel free to ask either myself or Martina through a private message on our chat. And with that said, I introduce Dr. Martina Bingham.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We thought it would be important before we start asking questions of our panelists to just talk for a few minutes to acknowledge some of the scholarship that has been put forth by our organizations and doctors and scientists regarding singing and COVID-19. So many of you, I'm sure, have already heard a lot of this information, so I'm going to keep it short. But one of the main factors that we're very concerned about is aerosolization in singing. Aerosolization is basically when a substance or a fluid, the particles become small enough that then it can be transmitted in the air. And so in the most basic sense, we know that congregational singing can be quite dangerous, but we don't really have all of the answers about why and how dangerous it is. So I'm just going to give you a few points of things that we do know. The first is that studies have been conducted on what was called sustained vocalization, which is still a form of speech. And it was found that sustained vocalization can produce 10 times the amount of particle concentrations than does regular breathing. So we're kind of left to infer that singing, which uses higher levels of respiratory energy and force, is likely more of a risk than sustained vocalization. So in response to that article, scholars have suggested that singing could produce up to 60% more aerosolization than normal speech. We know a lot of interesting information that may not be immediately helpful, but we know things like the fact that loudness or volume increases the number of aerosol particles emitted. And we know that some people produce more than others. Again, that's something that we're not quite sure why it happens. One person could sometimes produce up to 10 times more particles than the person standing next to them, just based on that person's physiology, respiratory physiology, and maybe singing and speaking habits, excuse me. We also know things like certain phones or parts of speech also produce more aerosol particles. For example, for some reason, an E vowel produces more than an A vowel. And things like plosive and voiced consonants are going to emit more than unvoiced consonants. So those are all little bits of information that we might be able to use later, and of course are interesting in the study of aerosolization, but really don't necessarily give us concrete answers today. So because this is a brand new virus, we don't have an exact measure on exactly how dangerous communal singing is, but we do have a lot of anecdotal information that I won't get into. I'm sure you've heard of it, and it's really not fun to talk about. But we have a lot of anecdotal information that choral singing can cause a danger to us, which is, of course, so difficult for all of us musicians, and I'm sure our congregations to deal with. So I know that it can be very overwhelming to go to the NATS page or ACDA page and see 5 pages worth of data on this. They have compiled a couple of short documents with links to articles that are being circulated. So I'll go ahead and share that in the chat page, or on the chat function as soon as I'm done speaking. I'll provide 2 links, one from NATS and one from Chorus America, that are just the PDF, or excuse me, just 1-page lists of links, so that if you wanted to go and search for particular information, you have tools to do that. I'd like to talk about one more thing, which is something that I think provides some hope for a lot of us, that's that there's a robust study that's being undertaken at the University of Colorado at Boulder in their aerosol laboratory. They're conducting research to better understand aerosol rates while singing and playing instruments, and particularly in confined spaces like churches, like rehearsal halls, with the goal of, to quote, creating scientifically proven methods for the return to performing arts in a safe way, with research showing us best practices and advocacy. So we're hoping that the results of this study, which is funded by a coalition of many different performing arts organizations, including ACDA and NATS, we're hoping that they'll be able to report preliminary findings by late June, and hopefully more by the end of the summer. So of course, we'll do our best to circulate that whenever we hear anything. All right, so if you have any questions for me, please, you can send them in the chat or reach out to me otherwise, but I'd like to get going on some of our questions for our panelists. So our first question is, what does worship, and more specifically music in worship, look like for your community right now? Sarah, would it be okay if we start with you?
Sure, thank you, Martina. And thank you, Jace and Martina, both for having us. This is really nice, thank you. So like I said, we're a small congregation, and so we have been, our diocese has been having a different church provide a live stream service every week. So each one of our congregations is not responsible for putting that together every single week, which is in some ways is kind of nice, but it's also hard because I feel like I'm missing that. So we do that, and then we provide every Friday, our priest does a sermon that we've started recording and sending out, and then she sends out the hard copy of it, and then I send out music resources for people. And that's looked like different things. It's been playlists that I've created on YouTube. It's been recordings that we've done in person. I haven't used a virtual choir thing yet for the church, but I have for my college. And so it's taken on a lot of different kind of forms, but we don't have services during the week that involve music. So we just have the Sunday experience where we view other churches, and then we have a Zoom coffee hour after that where we get together and talk about those different things. So that's what our situation looks like right now.
That's great. Dorita, can we hear from you?
Absolutely. Relatively speaking, the San Francisco Bay Area is not the first place you think of when you want to think the textbook definition of worship and community worship. We're not quite Redding, California, or even Los Angeles. But even with that, our beautifully thriving community, what we are doing is expressing worship in different ways that aren't necessarily through singing and music. A lot of this is, donating to crisis centers or starting social distancing mass sewing clubs to donate to our essential workers, and getting our younger parishioners to go grocery shopping for our older parishioners. And all of this is all languages of worship, but for our weekly services, we take it upon ourselves as a church because, like I said about the San Francisco Bay Area, our church is very much so like Burger King. It's have it your way. And people really love to belong to a certain Episcopal church, And for us, because of that, we have taken upon ourselves to pre-record our services every week. And what music looks like that is, I've transformed myself from organist choir master into a little intimate coffee house worship leader, which I don't hate that. I kind of enjoy and feel empowered being able to lead others in worship in that way. So that's what our worship looks like right now.
That's wonderful. I am so grateful that you shared a lot of the acts of service that you guys are focusing on in lieu of some of the musical experiences. Chris, would you like to add to that?
Sure. So up until just this last Sunday, Pentecost, we had been pre-recording our Sunday services. And the reason we'd been pre-recording them was so that we could insert music into the services. And we had been accomplishing that by recording the accompaniment and a soloist remotely. They would actually record separately, and I would be the one who multi-tracked them together using software. We would then insert that into the service. Occasionally we would put together virtual choir sorts of offerings about once every other week. I would create a click track or a backtrack using Sibelius. I would send that MP3 file out to the singers. They would then have sheet music, which I had marked for them. They would listen using headphones to the click track and sing their part according to what the music instructed them to do. And then we would meet later for a Thursday night rehearsal or cocktail hour, and we would lip sync using Zoom and record at the same time so that everybody's faces were being seen. If there's one thing I've realized about this whole situation, it's that seeing people actually seems to be more impactful than the quality of the sound that's happening. It's been really important to our community to see as many people making music as possible. And it's been important to our staff singers to be able to continue to offer themselves for their employment to the cathedral. After this Sunday, we are going into the church, and there's going to be a priest who pre-records the service from the building itself. Music will still be made remotely in the same fashion that we've been making it for the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you for sharing some of those details about the technology that you're using. I'm sure that's really helpful for all of us. Sarah, you mentioned that that your diocese is live streaming in different locations every week. So you've done one of them, I think you said. Can you tell us a little bit about the technological platforms that you used and how that was provided?
Yeah, so I didn't have much involvement in that. It happened. It happened when I was really, really ill. So I didn't actually have any, and I didn't know we were doing it. We found out, I think, the day before. So our priest very quickly recorded a sermon, and that was kind of it. It was the day before our bishop kind of shut everything down. But we don't use a lot of, I'm not very technologically competent, but I'm probably the most technologically competent person in my congregation. So that ought to tell you something. So, but that being said, I think I've been able to find ways to, use things, I've learned the virtual choir software, using that on Adobe, and we record live more than anything. So we have a group of younger people that will come in and we'll record, and then we'll put it up to YouTube, or we'll put it into different videos. So
Sarah, thank you so much for that mana'o, for that information. Our second question, team, is how are you folks going about planning in-person worship? And are you adhering to guidelines specifically related to singing? I'd like, Christopher, if you don't mind starting us off with that question.
Absolutely. The infection rate is not declining right now in Los Angeles. And because of that, we have no plans to meet in person as a congregation until such time as the governor of the state allows it to happen. The governor has made some special dispensations. There are some churches that are meeting, but the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles has made a decision that until it's safe by CDC standards, we're not going to pursue that. So at this point, we get to buy a little time. Our choral season ends at the Feast of Pentecost, and we have a summer program where a soloist usually sings with the accompaniment, and that's going to be the way we operate things until October 1st, at least, is when the choir season starts again. So we're hoping to see some real medical data come out of the University of Colorado study before we make any plans for the future. I would say that personally, I'm going to be planning for business as usual. I'm going to be planning as if we're coming back on October 1st, with the very strong understanding that that's highly unlikely.
Thanks. Sarah.
So really what we know as singers and what we're doing with music is informing what the rest of the congregation is doing, or what the rest of the church is doing in terms of their planning for worship, because singing is the piece that's the most controversial. It's the most difficult to put in right now. And it's so central to what we do. So that's a big piece of that. Everything's opening up around us. Many of the churches in our town are open. Idaho's, we're pretty close to getting to phase 4, which is our last phase before we just reopen everything. Washington's a little bit different. So our bishop has just said everybody's staying closed, and she will tell us when we will open. So like with Chris, we have a little bit of time to kind of figure out the way that's going to look, and we have some technology challenges right now anyway. And even when we go back to in-person worship, we're looking at doing several different services, but the majority of our congregation probably will not come in person. But the difficulty with that is people have connectivity issues, they have technology issues where they don't know how to use the technology. It's difficult. So the church is purchasing technology for some of those people so that they'll be able to participate. So we'll be looking at that as we do plan to come back together. So.
I think that kind of, I'd like to follow up on that statement, Sarah. I think for a lot of us, especially here in Hawaii, we're finding ways, or a need to help support our older congregants through this process. And I know that you were stating that you are the most technologically adept person there, but how has those conversations been like, or have you found yourself having to advocate specifically for that population as a music minister?
A little bit, and that started because one of my choir members doesn't really use email, and so she wanted to be able to connect and do things. And so one of my students at the college had a device that he was no longer using, and he donated that to her. So we got that set up so she could use that and participate and be a part of that. And then once I did that, they thought, oh, wow, you know how to do that? Why don't we make you our technology person? So I've gotten assigned that duty, and they don't realize I really don't know what I'm doing. But it's like we just figure it out. When you get a task or you got to do it, we just make it work because that's what we do, right? So Yeah, so we've done that. And I think that that's been really important, like I said, because most of our congregation are over 65 and they're not comfortable using technology. There are a few that are, but many of them are not. And that's hard. So we're also going to set up training sessions. Once we get those iPads for them, I'll be running training sessions, everybody's socially distanced in the parish hall, and step by step, here's how you get into a Zoom meeting. Let's practice. Let's set one up, and so that they can have a process by which to do that and then participate. So
I think that's a great point. I mean, especially as we plan, as Chris was talking about, and as we plan for business as usual, and also plan for plan B, plan C, plan D, a lot of it invites the use of technology. And I think for those of us in the worship community, then that creates a needed kuleana for ourselves to, being active in ensuring that we provide access and training for everyone that is involved in music and worship. So thank you so much. Dorita, do you mind taking it from here?
Absolutely. If you want to hear from your third Episcopal musician, again, we follow our guidelines from our bishop. Whatever he wants, we will follow. And luckily, he's a very smart guy. And he's always in the meetings that discuss all of these issues. But so far, the guidelines that we have been given that no one under 65 will attend church immediately, which breaks my heart because that's the majority of our church. But there's also light talk of RSVPing for church, temperature checks at the door, having very specific check-in times where they wait in the parking lot until their phone says it's time for them to check in. And then, of course, not having a choir, which is my livelihood. But this gives us the opportunity to very much so focus on developing the love and the joy and the skills of individual worshipers. When we do return to in-church worship or in-person worship, we are going to live stream them for people that aren't able to attend, and we're going to maintain social distancing and show that on the screen, physically model what it looks like to be doing that. And one of the funniest things that was suggested is, those plexiglass things that are in between you and the cashier at the grocery store. Somebody recommended that for the choir, and something that has already been created for that specific reason is the drum shield. The drum shield that you can put around the piano if it's just you singing. So that's always been an option for us, and we own one. They're super pricey, but I think totally worth it for times like these.
Thank you, friends. We got a question, and the question is a two-parter, and I'll answer the first part. Actually, the first part of the question is: with a seemingly low declining infection rate, where are we at contextually in Hawaii? And to kind of to provide mana'o to that question, as we all know, 2 weeks ago, the mayor on Friday declared that churches or spaces of worship are allowed to meet. And what your state ACDA and NATS chapter did was quickly and swiftly put together a statement that kind of advocated or provided guidance around current data and around the safety of congregational singing, which we advised against. Since that time, I have been in conversation with our State Department of Health to help kind of outline guidelines that can provide a path or some overall guidance to each specific diocese, or to help inform bishops, or help inform respective state church and worship leadership. I think it's important to mention that as we step into the fall, things will rapidly change, and noting the diversity of our community of worship here in Hawaii, we may meet in alignment with each other, and we also may meet in ways that we step out of alignment for our own respective needs. But I think overall, we all have a responsibility here as practitioners of music and providing leadership for our spaces of worship to be as informed with the data as possible. And so something that we'll do is we will constantly and as much as we can keep you informed of what we know. The second part of the question is actually informed and connected to our next planned question. So Martina, I pass it along to you.
Okay, thank you, Jace. Yeah, let's continue to our next topic. So we have another question for you all, and that's, how are you keeping your community engaged musically? And are you receiving feedback from your musicians and your congregants? Dorita, can we start with you?
My apologies. As I would like to, can you hear me? I can't hear anything else. Okay, great. We have been pre-recording and then live streaming, and how that has been working out is I mentioned that I have section leaders that are college students, or maybe I didn't mention it here just now, but in my normal every week choir, there are 4 section leaders that I have that happen to be college students. And these college students bring so much joy and energy to what we do at our church. And I've been inviting them to assist me in these recordings, where they would come on a Wednesday night and they would stand 10 feet away from me, and we would sing and record together our worship. And like I said, I've been doing a little bit less of hymn singing and leading from the organ, and doing a little bit more leading from the piano in a more contemporary worship. We did one virtual choir, which I happened to do kicking and screaming all at the same time, which it took a lot of energy for them to convince me to do it. But when I did, it made everyone smile, and it was very important to the choir, very important to the parishioners to see the choir's faces. And also, it trained me on how to do it, which was also a very important tool. And then I'd also like to bring up getting a chance to make music during this time with the young folks, even if it is from a unreasonable distance or a reasonable distance, was not just enriching to, it hasn't been just enriching to the church, but it did a lot for my college students. And being able to keep a full staff during this time, which a lot of my church colleagues have been furloughed and everything, it's been my personal job to make sure that my college students are keep getting paid, because not only because of the love that we can show them and the dignity that we can show them at the same time, but also they aren't getting much work either. So whatever we could give them was extremely helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's so relevant to many of us here. And you're talking about the responsibility that you have not only to your congregation, but also to your singers, some of whom are paid and some of whom come to volunteer at your church every week. So that's definitely another level of responsibility that we haven't touched on yet. Sarah, would you like to add to that?
Sure, yeah. And yeah, it's such a tough time. And our bishop currently was our priest before she was elected bishop. So she knows the small church really, really well. And she made it very clear that the first priority of every single church was that there would be no layoffs or furloughs or anything until this was over. So everybody kind of breathed kind of a sigh of relief. So it was nice. So I think I mentioned that I was doing weekly YouTube playlists to kind of go with the liturgy. And there are things that are really great about that, things that aren't so great. But one of the things that I love about it is that it allows you to experience and explore more music than you could ever put into a Sunday service. And I like that. And the other thing that I really like is I have a congregation who is very set in their ways, that if it's not in the 1982 hymnal, then it's not Episcopalian. I mean, they're very strict about that. And since I've been here the last 5 years, I've been bringing in new kinds of music and different styles of music, and very slowly, and they're coming around to that. But this gives us an opportunity to explore those things that we could never do, in our church. Big choir, grand choral works that I've done with other choirs, but I could never do them here. They get to experience those things that we could not do in Sunday worship. Some of the contemporary things that I think are really great that they tend to be resistant to, it's a great opportunity to expose them to some of that. And so I've really used it as a way to expand our musical ear, if you will, because I think that's really great. What I don't like about it so much is that it's not as personal. And I know that our people they want to see their people. They want to see their space. They miss being in church. And so we've also been recording, occasionally recorded solos. We have a small group of young people who were all together in high school, and they're all like 5 or 6 years out of college now, but they still live in the area, and they come together and we'll record pieces. And we do that in our space. The first ones we did were for Holy Week at the request of the bishop, because they're people that grew up with her. And that, I think, means a lot to them, because they can see their own place and they can feel like they're home when they do that. And I think if you can do that, I think that's really important for your congregation. If the choir especially is not meeting and you're going to have a live stream service or something, that they can see the space and feel like they're there and that they're a part of that. So that's been really important. And some of those, we're starting to do more of those with myself and the organist, the hymns, and letting the congregation request the hymns that they want to hear. And I could go find them on YouTube, but they want to hear our organ. They want to see their stained glass windows, their, all of that. So we're recording them. And yeah, I could find way better recordings than me singing, but it's more meaningful. It's familiar to them. That's important. So we're going to send some of those out and post them on the church Facebook page so that they can find those and access them whenever they want. And then the last thing that I've suggested, and it doesn't work as well for our church because we're pretty small and we don't have as many musical families, but it's one of the things I recommended for our diocese when I did the session last week, is that if you have a lot of musically talented families in your church, family groups, things like that, you might invite some of them to do a family recording night, do a piece or two or something, and then compile that into, put it into iMovie or something, and have like a virtual hymn night or a virtual concert of the people in your church. And you could even set it up as a watch party, so everybody's watching it together if people are doing that and they have the technology available to do that. But that's something, it requires a little bit of technology know-how, but it's in a way to sort of unite people and involve people where that sometimes is difficult. I know when we do go back to everybody being together, it's going to be one person singing. And I've recommended the plexiglass as well for singers and around where the priest is speaking, so that we don't need to use masks. So I think, it'll look different, but we figured out ways to do that.
Thank you so much. Lots of good ideas. Chris, can I hand the baton off to you?
Sure. So the first way we've been keeping our musicians engaged is by keeping them employed during this entire season. We felt it was extremely important from a pastoral imperative to maintain their employment, especially at a time when they were being laid off from so many of their other jobs. It hasn't been easy. There have definitely been some vestry meetings where people are like, what are we doing here? We're spending all this money on people who aren't doing their jobs. And so it's been an opportunity for, I think, some grace and to sort of explore some aspects to our belief system that we don't always get to explore if this were not the situation. The other thing that we're doing for staff singers is we're giving them the opportunities to sing solos that they wouldn't ordinarily get to sing, with a pretty heavy choral load at the cathedral. And so this has been an opportunity to really showcase them in repertoire that they rarely get to sing at the cathedral. It's sort of brought them in some ways in a closer way to the community, because they get to express themselves in what they do best. So that's been really wonderful. In terms of the congregation, I would say that I, like all of us, I think am probably feeling more drawn to pastoral aspects of my job than I ever was before, from being engaged in all of the social media offerings that we have on a weekly basis, from our weeknight evensongs and evening prayer services, to our Sunday night compline services, which I'm usually chanting from my living room on Facebook Live, to just playing things at my keyboard here in my living room and recording it and putting it up on our private cathedral community Facebook page and saying, hey, I was thinking about us all today and this is what I'm doing, to our Zoom coffee hours after services, staying really engaged with people in a way when usually I'm just like super focused on the music making and not so much on all of the personal connections that come with the responsibility of the position. And I have to say, I've seen my relationships grow with people in the community because of that. And I hope it's something that I'm able to carry through after this Corona-tide season comes to its conclusion. We've been offering Sunday morning prayer, Sunday morning Eucharist. We've been offering Tuesday and Thursday night evening prayer services. The Sunday morning services have been pre-recorded. The weeknight services have been Facebook Live. Sunday night compline, which is sung, has been on Facebook Live. And what we found is that in some cases we have 5 to 10 times more people viewing these videos online than would ever darken the door of our cathedral. And so we know that regardless of when we come back, technology, live streaming, video production is going to be some part of our offering when we're back in the cathedral church itself.
It does sound like you've had a couple of positive symptoms come from it. That's wonderful. It sounds like we have a few questions coming in. So Jace, would you like to?
Sure. And I think, Dorita, you wanted to add to Chris's statement?
Yes, to add to what Chris said about not being able to have the opportunity to meet your parishioners or your congregation members, I have an unusually large amount of people who don't sing in the pews. I don't know if many of you sympathize with that, or recognize or relate to that. But at my church, if you are a singer, you sing in the choir. And what I have learned about working at my specific church is that getting to know them has been very important outside of the choir, outside of the musicians, and learning what their favorite hymns are, learning what phrases, what scriptures unite them, has really guided my programming in terms of music. And so at these weeknight evensongs that Christian has talked about, you can say, this is just for us, and you'll bust out with "I am the bread of life" or something like that, and they will just love it and feel so connected with their church. And just knowing what hymns really drive them and connect them has been really important to me, and the success of our church.
Thanks, Dorita. Sarah, there is a question for you. Some individuals wanted to know if you had any ideas of low to no technology activities that congregants could do that celebrates music and worship.
Yeah, in person or are we like outside of church?
Let's go with both.
Okay, so before we go back, right? For example, if we have people who maybe don't have technology and they want to participate, our Friday email goes out via snail mail on Wednesday of that week. And so that goes out with some of the information, and it does have links to the YouTube, and we have not gone so far as to create a CD or anything like that yet for people, although we may do that depending on how much longer we're doing this. I know that we have talked about getting a booster for our technology at the church so that our internet will go out to our parking lot, because it currently does not. So that people who don't have internet at home, a lot of our much older congregants don't have internet at home, and they could then come to the church and they could be in the parking lot and they could log in that way. And some people have asked to be able to do that even when we're back in in-person worship, that they could still come to the building and not come in, but participate, because it's a part of that ritual for them, I think. So that's kind of what we're looking at there. Once we get back to being in worship, I think it'll be largely the same. We're going to continue to live stream. But like I said, we're also providing iPads for people who don't have the technology. So that's one thing. We're getting a grant from a Baptized for Life program that we've been working with. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's really primarily what we're looking at. So I should add, so not, without just having or not just having a YouTube playlist, I send out with that playlist an article. So sometimes it's a devotional type article about the liturgy, about the message and the music. And some days, like a couple of weeks ago, the Tallis, "If You Love Me," came up in the in our liturgy. So I didn't do a huge variety of music for the service, but I did an article about Tallis. And then I put several different pieces of Tallis, and I talked about Tallis and Bird and the situation in England and the Catholics, and why some of it's in English, why some of it's in Latin, and put that in. So sometimes it's something that's a little bit more educational, and then I can fulfill my nerdy academic research part of me as well and put that in there and try and teach them something. So I also include that. So people, maybe if they're not able to listen, they're still getting some portion of what that music that's coming through for them.
That's great. Dorita, Chris, did you have anything to add?
I'd add that we're finding opportunities for our singers who often just engage musically with the cathedral to actually engage pastorally. So for example, we offer a food pantry once a month that serves the downtown LA and Skid Row area. And because people over 65, who are usually the very faithful people who service this food kitchen, this food pantry, because they're not allowed to come participate, we had young singers sign up in their place and say, "I'm coming to do this for you today." And in that moment, when we had a bunch of singers together, we were able to, to actually be outside and impromptu sing together as we were passing out food. So that was one low-tech opportunity for us to make music together.
Dorita, anything?
Not at the moment.
Okay, that's fine. We have a question. Chris, did you want to ask this question in the Zoom?
Hi, Jace. Hi, everyone. So I messaged Jace privately, but I guess I'll ask. But how effective is plexiglass in preventing live choral singing or solo singing in churches? Like, if we, if the church wanted to invest in one, how effective is it? Or like, what have the studies shown, etc.?
I don't know that I've seen any studies that talk about that specifically, but it's not penetrable. So it's going to be effective in terms of stopping it right in front of you. I don't know how practical that's going to be for a choir, because you'd have to have it between every single person, because it doesn't just, it spreads out the further out it goes. So I'm recommending it for the singer, primarily, that whoever the cantor is for that day. We would just have one because we're a small enough congregation. So I'm recommending that they use a microphone, that those microphones are only used by one person during a service. And then they are sanitized afterwards. We've ordered a UV light to do that sanitizing. And that there is a plexiglass shield of some sort in front of that person, so that you're not dealing with trying to use a microphone through a mask, which can be problematic as well. And so I've also recommended the same thing for our priest. And whether that's something that they install in front of where she is, or that they put up and use each week, it doesn't really matter, but so that she, again, doesn't have to deal with a microphone and the mask. It's going to stop anything from going straight out. You'll have a droplet issue, but if that's not too far in front of that person, then it will be easy to clean and and sanitize without aerosols going out. And that's the primary reason for having something plexiglass, is to stop that, stop the aerosol. So.
I have nothing to add to that. I thought that was beautifully put. I do have to say that it looks atrocious and will not film well if you're going to live stream your services with plexiglass in the screen.
Gives whole new meaning to the definition brood screen.
And also, I had a second part to this too. I know instrumentalists were mentioned as well. Are there any resources or any articles or research developments regarding the spread of the virus for woodwind and brass players?
There was the one study out of Germany. I don't know if you've seen that. And many people were taking that, another study out of Germany that said, oh, singing is fine, everybody should sing. And there are some people who took that one study and said, oh, look, we can do all this now. And I just keep saying there's one, and then there's 100 that are saying, what you're hearing. And so I recommended to our diocese, obviously stringed instruments. This is the perfect era for the praise band. If you use a praise band, because guitars and drums and keyboards can all just wear a mask and be social distanced regularly. But I've recommended that brass instruments and wind instruments make the same precautions that singers do until we know more. I think that's the thing, is we just don't know yet. And we're planning for a wedding over Labor Day weekend where they want to have brass, and we're trying to figure out how that's even going to happen. So we're just going to have to wait. We don't know what we're going to be able to do with that. So I wanted to add about the singing too, is processing. That's the other thing I've said, is processing is a no-no. And I hate to call them out, but watching the National Cathedral, they've had people singing and processing and not wearing masks. And while they're beautifully socially distanced, they're really far away from each other, the priest at the end is walking through all of that aerosols that everybody has just let out. So I would be really careful about singing and processing if that's something that's happening as well.
I put it in the chat as well, Chris. Their College Band Directors National Association, CBDNA, our version of ACDA, also put out guidelines on this as well that kind of amplify what Sarah just outlined. There's another question as well around.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna look into that. I'll go back into muter now. Thank you so much.
Mahalo, Chris. There's another question as well, and there are two more. The first question is, are soloists wearing masks while they're singing? So if there's a cantor or any sort of thing, are they modeling using their masks either in live or recorded worship?
Not for us. And that's because they're not actually in the building. They're recording from their closet or wherever they want to be recording themselves in their little home studio.
They aren't wearing masks for ours either. Even though we are in our church, we are so far apart and facing the same direction that the risk of any of the aerosols coming close to all of us is very low.
Well, we're not really doing that right now, so it doesn't apply to us right now. Yeah.
Okay. And then I think we have another question in the chat. Our church has a large outside space for use. We don't have a church choir. We have a single worship leader who leads the congregation through singing. Is singing outside at all safe, dependent on formations? We have talked about plexiglass for the main worship leader and pastor. If this is better answered, oh, sorry, that's not for me to say. So basically, singing outside, thoughts?
I think it's really hard to say. We don't really know. We don't have the medical data yet to be able to make an educated or informed decision about that. And fortunately, there is a study being done this summer at the University of Colorado. And we're hopeful that the data will be peer-reviewed and replicated elsewhere by the end of summer. So we'll have a better idea of what direction we'll be moving in. I think the bottom line to carry with us is that groups of people singing is not going to end. Maybe the way we do it is going to shift and change. We just need data to direct us in how we do that.
we're going to do some worship outside. I think when, at least we're planning to, if we are able to ever get to the place where we open, because we have spaces to do that. And we'll be using 1 or 2 singers, probably masked. And again, it just depends on what we know then compared to what we know now. But I think it's certainly much safer than singing outside. It's, you know, naturally ventilated, but you still need up to, you know, 15 to 20 feet between people, and that becomes difficult. And we all know the acoustic singing outside is very, very difficult with the voice. And so that also complicates things as well. And so I think you just have to be really, really careful and intentional about the way that you do it. You know, if it's windy, then if the wind's blowing at the congregation, it's probably not a great idea. And at this point, congregational singing, we're not recommending at all. Although I've encouraged people, you know, if they really want to do the singing, watch the live stream, because you can sing as loud as you want with no mask for, you know, anything you want to while you're at home watching it in a live stream. So, yeah.
I was going to echo what Sarah said about congregational singing. It would really hurt to just say, you can't sing. The only people up here can, you know, and the way our church envisioned an outdoor service was to have the musicians on our 2nd floor balcony porch deck thing, which would work for us and then would require amplification and tricky logistics.
Thank you, friends. Chris, did you have another question? I see that your hand is up.
Oh, no, I do not. I didn't know it could be, I'll remove it.
Okay, that's okay. So we have one final planned question as we round out this hour. So we're going to kind of think about this final question as your last or final closing statements. And this question is, for Hawaii, who can currently worship according to CDC protocols, what advice do you have for us? How can we keep safe? And how do we message this within the spirit of community? Sarah, do you mind starting?
No problem. This is the tough part, because you want it to be positive. And I think we have a responsibility, we do, and our leadership and our churches have a responsibility to make sure that everybody that comes to worship is safe, and that we're considering their needs as well. And so in that sense, no matter how badly I want to sing, no matter how badly anybody wants to sing, it is not worth the risk of people's lives. And so I think that that's what's most important. You know, you're more important than my desire to want to sing. And believe me, we, the music people, are missing this more than anybody. It's what we do. It's our livelihood. It's, you know, it's what we've always done. For some of us, it's what the only thing we've always done. And so we understand that desire to sing together and to be together, but that we need to really think about our people, and that people, as much as important and wonderful as music is, people are more important. So I think that's a really great way to frame it, is that we're looking out for our people, and that it's not something that's going to end, and that we just look for creative ways to get around that. So. Oh, I should add too, in the chat, I put the link to my resources and the website for the Spokane Diocese, so you can access that if you'd like.
I'll add to that, that politicians are politically motivated to open up society. They're politically motivated to open churches, encourage us to open churches. And even some of our clergy might be motivated to open churches because of finances and tithe dollars and things like that. And ultimately, we need to be guided by empirical evidence, which we lack right now. And I am hopeful, I'm faithful that we'll have some of that empirical evidence to be able to guide our actions into the future. But it really behooves us to be circumspect about the ways in which we're making music right now. I think ultimately, although we're missing the quality, and we're missing our spaces of worship, and we're missing being together in person, we have the opportunity to explore an entire new side to our communities of faith, and our music making community, specifically within those larger families, where heart seems to matter more than quality for a short time. And I come from a cathedral where like quality is everything. It's sometimes it's like, you know, the tail wagging the dog in many ways. But I heard a colleague say, wouldn't it be the most incredible witness for the church if churches were the last places in our society to open out of deference for people's public health? How incredible would that be for the witness of whatever faith community we come from, that we care more about the weakest among us, instead of just saying, I can't wait to get back and, you know, do Perry's I Was Glad the days that the church doors open.
We've missed so much church and important church. You know, every time we attend from home is important, but we've missed the big ones. And our desire to get back and create beauty and enhance beauty that glorifies who we worship is so high, that it's our responsibility to keep communicating and get better at communicating. One thing that would really break my heart is if we finally get to go back to choir rehearsals, is that I have two couples saying, we decided to no longer attend because we haven't heard from you. We haven't heard from you when you needed us, when we needed you the most. And I really speak to the whole, we are our choir, we are our music ministers' pastor. It's our responsibility to take care of of keeping those people connected. And also remain transparent about how you feel through all of this. And chances are you aren't alone in how you feel, and there will be somebody there to help you through it, help you drink through it if that's what you like to do. And it'll be amazing transformation for you and your church once you can figure it out together.
I'd like to add to that the optics of what we do matters a lot. And whether you think of yourself as a person empowered in a leadership position or not, or you're a more passive kind of leader, I speak for myself about that. I tend to not be a very heavy-handed leader, but we have to recognize that we are cloaked and mantled with a very optical kind of authority. It's going to mean that I take into greater consideration the way it looks, what I'm doing, than I probably ordinarily would. I have to be cognizant of how it looks when we reopen our church building, how it looks, the way that we are processing with singers, for example, Sarah mentioned so brilliantly. It's going to be exceedingly important because people are going to be looking to each one of us, everybody in this session, for what they're doing in their own churches.
I just want to say thank you to Sarah, Dorita, and Chris for all of this information. I really appreciate your spirit of responsibility and of care for your congregations. It's very obvious that you're doing everything you can to provide for not just the most privileged in your congregations, but everyone in the most creative ways that you can think of. And I know that that's hard for all of us, and it's something that we're grappling with in all of our musical experiences, both sacred and secular. So I just want to say a thank you. We don't have tons of time for more questions, but I think there'll be an opportunity to email Jace or I. Jace, do you want to speak to that? And we'll
Sure.
go ahead and finish up for the day. Thank you so much.
Great. Mahalo nui, Martina, and thank you to our panelists. So this is the second installment of our Calvella webinar series, and it has been very great to see so many people within our choral community here in Hawaii together as we look to the future and plan accordingly in ways that are responsible and rooted in data and research. Both Martina and I put our emails in the chat. Our next two installments of our Calvella webinar series, the third one will be called Accessible Technologies, Ensuring Engagement, Retention, and Community Outside of the Virtual Choir. and that is for all choral practitioners. And then we made a special one specifically for our community nonprofit choral organizations and for their board members. And that one is called Boards, Navigating Financial Stability. At any point, if you would like to offer mana'o or feedback or any ideas that you think would be beneficial for our choral community or for our singing community at large, we are open to all of your ideas. Please email both Martina and I so that we can be sure to respond in service and in support. So with that said, now that it is 6:01, I would like to honor your time. Can we all just extend a silent applause to Sarah, Dorita, and Christopher? Mahalo nui. All right, friends, you'll hear from us very soon. Have a great evening, and we'll see you soon. Aloha.